2023 was a year that had a lot of really good movies in it, and it was also a year that had a lot of not so good movies in it, and this is going to be a video going over the top 10 worst movies of 2023. Now, I feel like I have to make a couple of disclaimers before I continue on with this video. You're probably going to wonder why I haven't included movies like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, or Aquaman the Lost Kingdom, and that's because I simply didn't watch those movies, and I'm not going to go out of my way to see them in order to include them on a list like this. These are only going to be movies that I've watched, obviously, so if there's a film that's missing from this list that you feel should be there, that's why. And secondly, and for some reason I feel the need to say this because some people are stupid, but this is obviously a subjective list. Your top 10 worst movies of 2023 list will probably look a little bit different than my top 10 worst movies of 2023. And that's okay. That's what art is. People have different viewpoints on it. It's awesome. But I felt the need to say that because, again, people are going to be like, oh, I don't think these are the worst movies of the year. You're stupid. Sometimes people are exhausting. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the list itself. At number 10, we have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, this is a film that I really didn't have that many high expectations for anyway, since it's coming off of the back of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, a movie that I'm already not a fan of and that people kind of have more of a lukewarm reception towards compared to the rest of the movies in the series. Also keeping in mind that it's been over a decade since we've had a previous entry in this franchise, so that usually doesn't bode well. There's a few rare exceptions where it works out, but more often than not, it's usually just for the purposes of a cash grab. And unfortunately, it seems to me that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny just feels like a cash grab. It's them trying to see if they can test the waters one more time to see if they can get old Harrison Ford in the role again and squeeze some more money out of it. And, you know, the people spoke with their wallets and this movie didn't do very well financially. But all that being said, this is a film that I think the weakest part of it is the character writing. Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, to me, is probably one of the worst things about this movie. I don't necessarily think that her acting is bad. In fact, I think her acting is pretty good, and I think that she's doing exactly what the director wanted her to do. It's just that her character writing is more frustrating than it is fun. To me, it felt like they were going for a sort of charming, whimsical, sassy, more of a subterfuge-like character that you don't know if you can trust them or not. And there are certainly movies that do that have fun with it, that you can get behind because the writing is convincing you that it's more of a fun thing than a frustrating thing, but they make her quite an unlikable and annoying character throughout the entire movie, and I just felt myself being irked every time she tried to do one of her shenanigans and they attempted to play it off as fun, when in reality it just got really repetitive and pretty stale after a while. I also wasn't a huge fan of her little kid sidekick. I thought he was pretty bad acting and writing. He just annoyed the fuck out of me, and I wish he went away as soon as he popped up on screen. I was completely over him. The movie's long, it's meandering. There's a lot about it that I fail to remember, and to me that is kind of a sign of a movie being pretty poor or below average, is that if I fail to have anything stick out in my mind as noteworthy, then that is a negative on the film itself. And I'll just say this, sometimes the old age makeup looks fine, but it's pretty distracting in a lot of scenes to me. There's a lot that distracted me about this movie in terms of the de-aging special effects on Harrison Ford. I mean, it looks fine in some shots, but in other shots you can tell it's just a mapping of his face trying to make him look younger than he actually is, and of course once he starts speaking, his old man Harrison Ford voice gives it away entirely. So yeah, not a film that I expected to be good in any sense of the word, but was still kind of disappointed in what it ended up being. I was hoping for something that was a little less meandering and poorly written and frustrated. And unfortunately, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has all of those three qualities going against it. At number 9, we have Knock at the Cabin, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. This, of course, I also didn't really have that high of expectations for because I typically don't really like M. Night Shyamalan's movies, especially his more recent ones. And while I don't think this is as bad as something like Old or Lady in the Water or The Happening or After Earth or any other movie I could throw in there, what it wants to be is really smart, really intelligent, really forward-thinking when it comes to the writing and the themes going on in this movie. It feels like a film that really wants to be deep, but it feels as shallow as a kiddie pool. The themes are thrown right at your face. There's really no ambiguity when it comes to it. It treats you like you're stupid, and I really don't like it when a movie does that. I think that's one of the biggest offenders that a movie can have when it comes to my personal experience with watching a film. That, and there's not really that much in the way of characterization. You're following this couple that have an adopted daughter, and you get flashbacks of their lives and how they interact and their relationship and what it's like, but it feels like it's too little too late in the situation that they're already in. We don't really know these people, and therefore we don't really care about what they're going through. Some of the cinematography is cool, but there's not enough about it to justify the poor script and the lack of characterization amongst this cast. Not too surprising that the latest entry from M. Night Shyamalan is again a disappointment. Coming in at number 8, we have The Flash, a movie that nobody expected to be good in any way. Not even thinking about the whole Ezra Miller bullshit that surrounded the movie right before it came out. I say right before, but it had been going on for like, what, a year plus at that point, and people were wondering how the movie was even gonna get fucking released when Ezra Miller was acting like a fucking psychopath. Those controversies aside, this is a movie that just doesn't work on almost every fundamental level. I think the humor is very hit or miss. I think that the special effects are just god fucking awful, and I really love the director's excuse of, oh, the way he runs fast, it bends light in reality, so we don't really know what that sort of thing would look like as humans whose perception is so limited. And it's like, okay, what about the scenes where he's not running fast then? Is the light reflecting off some weird reality thing then? Andy Muschietti, you fucking bastard hack. There's not only one Ezra Miller in this movie, there's 2 Ezra Millers, and if you've seen the trailer, I'm not really spoiling anything for you, and that gets pretty annoying really fucking quick. And this isn't really a spoiler, but I'm just going to mention it anyway. The really kind of distasteful use of bringing back certain actors as kind of a cheap cameo really kind of left a poor taste in my mouth, and it really didn't even leave that much of an impact as far as like the story or anything going on. They were literally just there as references for you to point at and go, oh, I know about this. This is that thing that I'm familiar with. Wow, this movie gave me a boner. When that's all that the cameos and the references function as, it's super fucking shallow, and I can't stand that bullshit. Yeah, The Flash, not surprising that it's as bad as it is. This is at the number 8 spot. Number 7 is going to be a movie that I really haven't talked about much on this channel, and frankly is one that I really haven't had that much of an opportunity to speak about in general, and that is The Sound of Freedom. This is a film starring Jim Caviezel, who is trying to track down a boy and a girl who had been taken into a human trafficking situation. So this is a movie about him fighting human trafficking, and it's based off of a real story based on this Homeland Security agent named Tim Ballard, I think his name was, and that's who Jim Caviezel is playing in this movie. This is a film that had a lot of controversy surrounding it. It still has a lot of controversy surrounding it as we're learning more and more about some of the producers and their involvement with child kidnapping charges and things of that nature. For this video, I'm only going to discuss the movie as a movie. I'm not really going to try to delve too much into the whole like QAnon stuff, the Jim Caviezel statements. I'm not going to try to dive too much into that. I'm just going to try to stick with this film as an art form. And as an art form, I think it fails pretty bad. This is a movie that makes it feel like if you say anything bad about this film, then you're supporting all the bad things that are happening to the children depicted in this movie. And that just leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. It's that type of criticism that people kind of give this movie a pass for because they truly believe that because the message of this movie is so inherently good and that everybody agrees with it, then that makes it a good movie in of itself. And I don't think that's true. First of all, the depiction of abuse that the kids go through in this movie goes on way too long. There's too much of it. there's a lot of different repetitive scenes going on of that same sort of thing, and frankly it kind of feels pretty disgusting. You don't need to show me kids going through all this terrible abuse and all these horrible things in order for me to get behind what the main character is doing. It reminds me of that scene in Community where someone's preaching about the environment or oil spills or something, and then someone replies with, "Nobody's on the other side of this issue." Like, that's literally what this movie is. Nobody is on the other side of this issue. Nobody is out there vocally saying, hey, human trafficking good. I mean, I'm sure there's a few wackos out there, but they're fucking evil anyway. But it's hammering home a point that we already kind of agree with. So why do you feel the need to make it so drawn out and make us already feel bad about a subject that's just already inherently awful anyway? The pacing is a slog. It drags so hard because it includes so many of those really repetitive scenes. Jim Caviezel isn't as much of a character in this movie as he is kind of a wooden vessel to spout off really epic lines like God's children aren't for sale. You know, I made a pog face when that happened. It was pretty epic shit. Yeah, and speaking of that, the writing is also pretty bad too. There's literally a moment where a character looks at a group of children playing and says to Jim Caviezel, "You hear that? That's the sound of freedom." Fuck off, this movie sucks. This is why it's on my top 10 worst of the year. Come at me, you QAnon dick suckers. At number 6, we have Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. More like a child of farts because this movie is stinky as shit. Zack Snyder isn't a director that I am that familiar with, but he's a director that certainly has a reputation within the film community, and let me tell you, it's not a good one. And after watching this movie, I can completely understand people's perspectives on him as a filmmaker, because this is so shallow and empty and has nothing going for it whatsoever. Nothing in terms of being original, nothing in terms of characters, nothing in terms of story, nothing in terms of anything substantial when it comes to the entirety of this film. Forget the fact that it's super derivative, right? A criticism that people have already lambasted this movie with, which I completely agree with, by the way. Forget the fact that it's a story we've seen done hundreds of times, multiple times before. Hero is forced to act on a journey and gather friends and allies in order to fight against the oppressive bad guy, right? That's a story that everybody is familiar with. It's basically Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? I don't usually mind that sort of thing if it's well written and the characters are something I can get behind, and this one is neither of those things. Each scene is so repetitive of Sofia Boutella going up to someone and being like, "Hey, I need you to help me fight the motherland," and then the other person goes, "Oh, I can't because, you know, my fingers are missing," and then Sofia Boutella is like, "I found your fingers in a garbage bin right out there," and then the guy's like, "Oh wow, I can fight for you." Obviously I just made that scene up, but it's basically like that every single time they meet a new character. It's like, "Hey, help us out. I can't because of this." "Well, what if we solve this?" "Okay, now I can." And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ. Is there any other scene in this movie that isn't like that? Does this have some sort of scene diversity in it whatsoever? No, it doesn't. It's fucking stupid. And then Zack Snyder has to like coat his stupid Zack Snyder bullshit over it with the fucking slow-mo and the drab, dark looking cinematography. Everything looks gray. Nothing feels like it's popping out at you. I can't even say the visuals of this are really that good because, my God, it's just so boring and dry to look at. Everything's so brown and dark red and fucking gray as shit. Nothing going on in this movie that I can really get behind, so that gives it the number 6 spot just right there. And boy oh boy, we got 5 more to go. At number 5, I think, is a very appropriate spot for this movie, especially thinking about the title of it, and that is Five Nights at Freddy's. This is one of those films that is kind of similar to the way people viewed the Mario movie, in that fans love it, fans can't get enough of it, but boy oh boy, as the movie itself, fucking yikes. I would say Josh Hutcherson and his acting is one of the few things that this movie kinda has going for it, but other than that, the character writing and the repetitiveness of it just keep it from even being a mediocre film. This is a pretty bad stinker of a movie. The flashback scenes are so stale and repetitive. The side cop character, who's like almost kind of a love interest for Josh Hutcherson maybe, her character motivations are all over the place and don't make any fucking sense. Oh, and I almost didn't mention Matthew Lillard. I guess he was fine in the movie too. He's kind of hamming it up, but if you think about the story even for a little bit, everything kind of starts to fall fall apart and doesn't make that much sense. Characters are cartoonishly evil. Characters lack any sort of subtlety or nuance or any sort of depth to them whatsoever. This is a film that if they ever made a sequel, I'm okay with just completely skipping it. I'm not interested in this franchise at all. I've never played the games. I have no invested interest in the fucking lore of it. You know, the bite of 87. Wow. And to me, this whole movie was just kind of a nothing burger. Just a couple of buns with some ketchup in it maybe, and that's about it. Speaking of bears, at number 4, we have Cocaine Bear. This is a movie that came out pretty early 2023. I think I saw this in February maybe. And this movie is just so fucking stupid because it was one that I went into expecting it to be stupid, and I was still pretty disappointed in the final product that I ended up getting. This is a film where I was completely fine going into it expecting it to just be about a rampaging bear on cocaine that went through a residential neighborhood or something and just slaughtered people. I would have been completely okay if the movie was just 90 minutes of that, just mindless violence and sort of horror elements thrown in there. But you only really get that for about a half hour. Otherwise, everything else about this movie is just substandard characters, really poor child acting, decisions from characters that don't make any fucking sense, and comedy that really doesn't land. I really didn't find this movie particularly funny either, because at the end of the day, it's also kind of a tongue-in-cheek comedy, but it doesn't even really work as that, so therefore this movie is just an all-around failure. And then you get to the end and you find out something about the bear that just made me roll my eyes, and I just thought, oh, okay, this is so fucking stupid. You're going from making this from an evil force of nature to something that we're kind of supposed to sympathize with, and I hate it when a movie does that because it feels so dumb and manipulative. Not that it really worked anyway, because I didn't fucking care. I was checked out after the first half hour, but this is a film that falls completely flat on its face and doesn't even live up to the premise of which it marketed itself as. Going in at number 3, we have 65, starring Adam Driver, and this is a movie I'm not going to talk about very long. Not because I've talked about it before, but because there's really not much about this movie that I even remember. It's an Adam Driver dinosaur movie. He's like a guy who lives on another planet and he's delivering cargo or something, and his ship crash lands on Earth, but it's Earth 65 million years ago. That's why it's called 65. In my opinion, that's a dumb fucking title. But it's essentially just Adam Driver and this little girl trying to get to the other part of the crashed ship so that they can go home while they're being chased by T-Rexes and shit. Like, this is basically a Jurassic World movie, except with just Adam Driver and this little girl. And that doesn't make it much better because it really feels like Adam Driver's just kind of phoning this in and the child actress is not good. And like, besides a few of those different things that I have gripes with, there's just really not much about this movie that I even care to remember. I just remember that it didn't have much going for it. It's super surface level. It doesn't do much in the way of making you actually care about the characters. And above all else, it's just a completely bland rice cake of a film. Just completely forgettable, not much of substance to it. Totally mindless drivel. I would just not recommend watching it at all unless you want something on the background for your kids to watch because they like dinosaurs. That's about it. At number 2, we have Fool's Paradise. This is a film that I was really looking forward to because I love Charlie Day. He was directing this movie, he's starring in it, he's got a really good cast behind him. And the trailer made it look like it might have had a little bit more going for it than the final movie actually does. This is a film that is painfully unfunny. This is a movie that you can tell Charlie Day is trying really, really hard to make you laugh, and it's just not landing. I think I laughed one time in this movie on purpose, and that was when there's a scene of Charlie Day trying to handle a bunch of kids, and it's just funny seeing him in that situation, and it's a visual gag, and that was about it. That's the only time I ever laughed at this movie on purpose. There's something that I really didn't touch on in my review of this movie that I kind of wish I had included, but I guess I'll just say it now, is that this film feels like Charlie Day got together with a bunch of his new Hollywood celebrity buddies, and he made a script, and they all filmed it, and they all looked back at it and they thought it was really funny because it's them being goofy. It's them doing things that they wouldn't normally do. It's Adrian Brody being zany. It's John Malkovich being zany. And they probably thought it was funny because they're working together and they're all friends with each other. But then you put this movie out for people who can't relate to you, people who can't relate to that level of familiarity and celebrity, and they just don't buy into it. They don't think it's funny because they're not the ones involved with making this movie. You watch back at a lot of your home videos that you either made with your friends or your family members, and you get a good laugh at them because of how ridiculous you are being in the video itself. You recognize that you're the one doing the silly things in the thing that you're watching, and that's inherently where a lot of the humor comes from. 9 times out of 10, the home video itself, if you showed it to a stranger, they probably wouldn't think it's that funny. And this has the same kind of energy to it. And that's something that I wasn't quite able to articulate that well in the review that I made, but I'm going to include it in here now, so hopefully that point gets across a little bit clearer. Besides that, the score is really repetitive. There's a lot of technical stuff that's just whatever. It's very bland. It kind of feels like it's trying to go for almost a Wes Anderson-y type of visual style and cinematography, and the characters and the way they're written are just so fucking annoying and repetitive. I just wanted every single person in this movie to just fuck off. I'll be keeping an eye on if Charlie Day ever does anything else because I really like the guy. I love him on Always Sunny. I think he's hilarious as just a person. I love listening to him on the Always Sunny podcast. He's one of my favorite people in the world, but I cannot back this movie in any way, shape, or form. It's a complete faceplant, and I really hope the next time he endeavors to do something like this, which hopefully he's not too discouraged from the reception Fool's Paradise got, hopefully next time he's able to kind of dig deep and express himself in a way that feels genuine and in a way people can relate to. Now, before I get into the number 1, I'm going to just touch on some honorable or dishonorable mentions real quick. And the first one I want to bring up is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Very forgettable Marvel film, very poor green screen qualities to it. It feels like this was put together very lazily. The writing and the characters aren't particularly that strong, and this movie, it feels to me, fails to establish Kang as a formidable villain when he gets his ass kicked by Ant-Man. Completely bland, completely forgettable, one of the weaker MCU movies, and kind of a noticeable trend in the way superhero films are going as of late, especially the big blockbuster ones. Next up is Napoleon. Napoleon is a completely messy, jumbled film. Feels like it was put together by chewing gum and chicken wire. And you can tell when you watch the theatrical cut of this movie, it feels like there are certain chunks missing. And when you read about the fact that Ridley Scott has a 4-hour cut of the movie that he's going to release on Apple Plus, then it makes sense, because there are scenes that feel like they've just had chunks just taken out of them in order to make the runtime of this a little more digestible for general audiences. I love Joaquin, but I'm not sure what the directing of his character was going for in this film. It feels like a jumbled performance, very inconsistent. I don't exactly know what they were going for with him as Napoleon, and just overall a really messy film to try and get through. Really head scratching at certain points. Next up we have Maestro, a film that has gotten some mixed reception from certain people. People call it Oscar bait, people call it wonderful, and I kind of fall in the middle of that. I kind of see the value in it, but to me it's a movie that really feels like it's trying to grasp at that Oscar very hard. To me, Bradley Cooper's performance of Leonard Bernstein almost feels a little too caricature-y. It feels like he's impersonating Leonard Bernstein and not really playing Leonard Bernstein, if that makes any sense. I really like Carey Mulligan in this movie, and I really do enjoy the cinematography and almost every single technical aspect that was put into this film. But this is also a movie that to me has a lot of problems in that it really doesn't do much to invest me in the characters. It doesn't really feel like it's trying to grab a hold of me in order to make me invested in what's going on in this film. And finally, we have Saltburn, a movie that I kind of enjoyed for about the first hour plus of this movie, and then it gets into the last 20 minutes and it completely fumbles the ball. This is a film that I was almost fully behind for most of it, and then the ending happened and it explains everything to you. It leaves no room for ambiguity whatsoever, and it just treats me like I'm stupid. This is going back to that thing with Knock at the Cabin where it felt like the script looked at me like I was stupid. And it kind of feels like towards the end of Saltburn, that's where the film gets into. I would have liked a little more ambiguity. I would have liked a little more in the way of leaving me with something to think about when it came to this movie. And there is a lot that I still appreciate about it. There's a lot that I enjoy. There are scenes in this movie that I actually quite love. But at the same time, this is a film that to me just drops the ball at the end of the runtime and almost completely lost me from then on. I don't think it's a bad movie necessarily. Obviously, it's in the honorable mentions or dishonorable mentions, so it's not the worst of 2023, but it's one that was kind of a considerable disappointment going into it and then coming out of. And finally, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. What is my number one? What's it going to be? Well, you're going to find out right now. The number one worst movie of 2023 that I saw was Liam Neeson's Retribution. This is a film we talked about on the podcast. This is a film that we've gone over extensively, but I'm going to go over it one more time just so I can explain to you why this movie is the worst piece of shit that I've seen in 2023. First of all, this is a Liam Neeson action movie, right? Wrong. How dare you think that? Because it's not a Liam Neeson action movie. It's a Liam Neeson sits in a car for most of the film movie because there's a bomb under his seat, and if he gets out of it, his car explodes. And so you get to see him riding around in a car for almost 90 minutes. Isn't that fun? Isn't that exciting? Isn't that cool? It's not fucking fun. It's not fucking exciting. It's not fucking cool. It's fucking lame as shit. At least with a movie like Non-Stop, a movie that takes place on an airplane, there's still some things about it that kind of make it interesting and a little bit exciting at points, right? I don't think that's a good movie at all, but I think it's at the very least kind of fun at moments. This is a movie that doesn't really have any fun moments going on for it because Liam Neeson is just sat down the entire fucking time. He's also just phoning it in. He's not really putting forth effort into the performance. He knows that at the end of the day, this is just a dumb paycheck that's going to have his name slapped on it so that people can go to the theater and see a Liam Neeson action movie when that's just not it at all. There's no passion, there's no effort, there's no moxie thrown into this performance whatsoever. It's just a completely phoned in type of thing. The plot is stupid, the characters are stupid, everything about this film is just inherently weak. There's nothing even interesting going on visually. At least when a character is trapped in a car for most of the movie, like Tom Hardy's Locke, for example, you can do things in order to make the camera and the visuals and the cinematography dynamic in order to keep you engaged at the very least on a surface level. But it doesn't even do that because it's so fucking vanilla and trash. And this movie kind of has a weird, vague message about technology and how it's being used in the current modern era. There's lines where people say to Liam Neeson, "Feels good to unplug every once in a while, doesn't it?" And it's kind of like that messaging of technology bad, spend more time with your family, because at the beginning of the movie, Liam Neeson's just looking at his phone the whole time while his wife's trying to talk to him. So you can tell that they kind of did a half-assed premise of, oh, we're going to touch on technology and how kind of bad it is, but we're not really going to get too deep into it because we're not a movie that's going to try. We're not a movie that's going to put forth effort. You're going to go see it anyway because you love Liam Neeson, you fucking cocksucker. Yeah, absolutely garbage movie, irredeemable, one of the worst movies I've seen, definitely the worst I've seen of 2023, which is why it gets the #1 spot. Thank you guys for checking this out. I appreciate it very much. The best of 2023 list will hopefully come out sometime soon. The only reason I'm waiting to make that is because I want to watch Zone of Interest before I make that list, and I feel like that's a movie that might make the top 10, depending on if I can see it in time, but hopefully that's a video that I will be able to put together in time for you guys to check out. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video either way. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the podcast, check out the film watches. I'll hopefully be making the December 2023 video very soon, so keep an eye out for that. And I look forward to making more videos for you guys in the future. But until then, have a good day, and I'm signing off. Bye-bye.